Hey guys, and welcome back to Project 40. This is my 2020 Mini Clubman John Cooper Works, and wow, that is very hot. Your eyes do not deceive you. I am not driving the Punto, but don't worry, I've not sold it. It's just that we're waiting a few days before we can start to do the bodywork swap. So in the meantime, I thought I'd introduce you to what is in essence my daily driver. This is the definition of a Marmite car. The design and the color, people are either going to love or they're going to hate. I suspect probably hate more than love, but I like it. Kind of looks like a bullfrog to me. Under the hood, you have a 2-litre turbocharged engine that's used across some performance BMWs as well. It puts out 300 brake horsepower and 331 pound-foot of torque. It's a punchy engine, it's strong through the rev range, it's just a bit dull to listen to. So having owned this car for a year is actually quite a bit of a milestone because I'm sure like a lot of you, I tend to go through my cars quite quickly. And so having a car for a year is actually quite a big thing for me. In the year running up to actually buying this Mini, I'd owned a Tesla Model 3 Performance, a Lexus LC500, and then finally I stumbled upon this. Moving on to the interior, I would give this an 8 out of 10. Yes, there's some scratchy plastics, yes, there's some piano gloss plastics, but there's a lot of soft touch as well. So overall, it feels like a premium place to be. Moving on to the rear seats, there's a decent amount of leg room. I'm sitting behind myself, I'm 5'11". There's a little bit of headroom here. There's a decent amount of knee room. These seats having essentially been scalloped out means that you have a little bit of extra leg room. There's nothing kind of stopping your feet from going under the seats, which is great. There's 2 USB-C charger ports, a little vent. I think okay, and certainly for a younger family, more than enough space than what you need. And even for 4 adults, I think you'd be okay on a reasonable trip. The panoramic sunroof is a must in my opinion. Not only do you get a little bit of extra headroom, but without it, it feels very, very claustrophobic. One thing that this car doesn't have, no center armrest, and I think that is a big miss, whoever specified this first time round, because it just would make this car a little bit more comfortable on long journeys for those in the rear. Now, when I wanted to get a replacement for the LC500, it had to be a few things. It had to be practical, it had to be reasonably comfortable, and it had to be fast. I'd owned a Mini convertible before, an R53 shape, so one of the original remake Minis, and I love that car. I'm actually sad I ever sold it, and I probably will get another one in the future, but a Mini convertible isn't really a practical family car, unfortunately. So I knew that I probably couldn't get that as my replacement, but there were a few other options in the Mini range. There was the Countryman, which is their kind of quasi 4x4 thing. Didn't really like the look of that, and I didn't really want to get a 4x4. It just didn't seem like a good fit for me. They're not terribly sporty, and it just didn't seem to have many benefits for me, which kind of brought me onto the Clubman. Now, I did like the original Clubman that launched probably in 2006-07, so the R56 kind of model era of the Mini, but because it had that single suicide door on the driver's side, it didn't really seem that much of a good idea. So I didn't get one way back when. So when they launched the F56 version of the Clubman, I think it's the F56, let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, it seemed to correct many of the flaws of the original new version of the Clubman. It actually had 4 doors, technically it has 6 if you include the Clubman doors at the rear. It was better built, it was more reliable. In late 2018, early 2019, Mini did their mid-cycle refresh of the Mini range, and so you got things like slightly better headlights, different gear sticks, no major changes, except for the John Cooper Works Clubman, because up until that point, the John Cooper Works Clubman I think had something in the region of maybe 225 brake horsepower, and it was front wheel drive. It was okay, but it didn't really feel overly sporty, because obviously a Clubman is going to be by its very nature a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier, and so they changed that for the 2020 model year by putting in a 2-litre 300 brake horsepower engine from, I believe, the BMW M140, and it is a punchy motor. Now, a 2-litre engine isn't always going to sound that interesting, but bloody hell does it accelerate well. So 0 to 60 comes up in 5 seconds. which I think for a family car is more than sufficient. Yes, I've owned faster cars, the Tesla Model 3 Performance, that did it in 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds. The LC500, that did it in a beautifully sounding 4.5 seconds. But I think the overall package of performance, space, reasonably good visibility, and we'll get onto that more later on when I talk about the interior, I think it was a very compelling package. Now this one is pretty well spec'd out. I think the only option it doesn't have is the heads-up display, but it has, I think, pretty much every other option available. It has the XL nav with wireless CarPlay and a wireless charger. It has the Harman Kardon speakers, which sound fantastic. It has the panoramic sunroof, and the most important thing to me was adaptive dampeners. Now, obviously a car of this size isn't going to have anything like electromag suspension or air suspension or anything like that. And the stock JCW, both Mini and the Clubman, is incredibly stiff, like almost painfully so. So having adaptive dampeners was an absolute must, because it takes the Mini from being pretty uncomfortable to being, I wouldn't say comfortable, but bearable. Because they're adaptive dampeners, when the mood takes you, you can switch them on, set them to their hardest setting, and have a lot of fun on the twisties. But it's not something I've done all that often. I've always had my sport mode set in sport engine and comfort suspension, because it is just so harsh. Maybe if I take it on a track day, maybe when I take it to the Nürburgring, I'll switch the suspension up to be on its hardest setting, because it probably makes sense there. But for day driving, it's just too hard. Now at the moment this car is bone stock. I've not really felt the need to modify it. It would be nice to have a slightly better sounding exhaust note or better sort of intake noise, but whilst it's still in warranty, I didn't really see the point. Now it's coming up for 3 years old, and I'm now out of the sort of Mini second-hand warranty, I think next month. Maybe I can start to investigate modifying it, or maybe I can sell it and get something new. I think the pull of the new is always quite a hard thing to resist, I will be honest. And I wouldn't mind something just a little bit more comfortable. I think we did a long distance drive down to Goodwood for Revival last weekend, and I took the Mini because I thought that would be quite a nice fun car to do it in, and it is quite noisy on the motorway, and it is quite jiggly, and it's just not a very good car for long distance driving. You can get from A to B and, you know, that's fine, but it's gonna wear on you. It's a very, you know, I think very tiring car to drive long distance. There's a lot of road noise. I don't know if there's a lot of reflection from the panoramic sunroof, but it's just a lot of noise when you're driving. It's okay here when around town. Almost a similar setup to the Tesla really, and it was probably okay around town, but long drives was just incredibly wearing and very tiring. And you know, I'm 40 now, maybe I need to start thinking about some sort of squishy Luxo barge. And so that's what I've been looking on Auto Trader at the moment, is trying to find something that is interesting, that is supremely comfortable, that's powerful, that's probably is some sort of automotive financial disaster, that's, you know, a little bit interesting, because I don't like boring cars. I think any of my cars need to have a hook. They need to be interesting to maintain my goldfish-like attention span. But I'm not too sure what to get next. I've been looking at A8s, I've been looking at Phaetons, I've been looking at S-classes, hopefully something with like a V12, because that feels like a practical family car, you know, a V12 or something like that, but we'll see. I need to get this car sold. I need to get parts Punto sold as well before I buy anything new. And I might still keep it, I don't know. I think it ticks a lot of boxes, and I don't know if there's anything we could do to improve the ride quality, or not the ride quality per se, the road noise. I don't know if we could put in extra sound deadening, or like things like Dynamat, that sort of stuff, to help reduce the road noise. And perhaps even looking at the tyres, maybe the ones I've got, I can't remember what I've got on these at the moment, but I only just put 4 tyres on last year, so I don't really want to replace them just yet. But if I do keep it, and when it comes to replacing them, you know, down the line, maybe I can find something that's a little bit quieter to drive. But one thing I love about all cars in the range is they drive like Minis. Nice, tight, direct steering. You feel connected. Yes, it's electronic power steering, so you're not going to have true feel like a hydraulic system, but it just feels like you've got direct input. And I think that's something that's a lot missing from a lot of cars these days, is feeling like you're actually doing something. And because it's four-wheel drive, this car grips. And you can have real confidence going into some tight corners, carrying speed. And I think point to point on a racetrack, this car would be hard to beat. I think the combination of good power, good torque, and a very good chassis with fantastic grip, even stock, I think that would be really hard to beat. Now, I haven't taken this on a track day yet, but I think I might. I think that would be fun. Oh, there we go. The only downside is that noise that you're hearing, that's fake. It's piped in. I think it's fairly common these days, and it's a bit of a shame. And also you can't disable it. I haven't found a way of shutting it up because it's, obviously it's just a bit artificial. And if you're going to do an artificial noise, why not make it a little bit more punchy? You might as well sort of zhuzh it up, you know, a little bit, rather than just make it this weird sort of artificial electronic drone. Doesn't really do it all for me. Now, one thing I'm not 100% sold on is the gearbox. Now, this only came as an automatic. I think you can get the JCW standard Mini in a manual gearbox, but you certainly couldn't do that for the Clubman. Now, day to day, an automatic gearbox is great. I think, you know, having a manual gearbox is always going to be, you know, fun for the twisties, but pretty crap for day to day. But I think this car probably could really benefit from a manual gearbox because, yes, you can switch it to manual mode, and you can get through the gears. But I think the automatic gearbox with slightly slow changes, combined with a rev limit that comes up almost way too quickly. So this only goes up to 6,000 revs, which I think is pretty low when you're dealing with a sports car. I think it would be nice if it came up to 6.5, 7,000. I've whacked it into sport mode, and it's a lot harder on the shifts. It does have manual flappy paddles, but I've never really been convinced about using them. Maybe I've been spoiled by the LC500 because that gear change is something to behold. The flappy paddles instantly change gear, and it really feels like you're doing something. With these, you know, down to second, it's all right. But that 6,000 rev limit comes up so fast, it just doesn't feel particularly fun to do it on manual mode. I think one of the downsides of the design of the Clubman is the roof is really quite low. It gives it that kind of sporty, rakish feel, but it does, I think, really impact the visibility when looking out the front. I've got the seat in the lowest setting, and I'm still getting obscured by this roof line. It can be quite challenging at traffic lights because you can't actually see them because they essentially sit in this massive blind spot here, which is, again, a little bit frustrating. No video about the Clubman would be complete without talking about these Clubman doors. Are they a gimmick? Probably. Are they inconvenient? Sometimes. Would a hatchback be better? Definitely. Do I hate them? No, I actually really like them, because whilst they can be inconvenient sometimes and you have to think about where you park, I actually like just sitting on the tailgate, particularly after like a long distance drive and when you've stopped to have a break. You can open up these doors, you can have your cup of tea there, and you can have a sandwich. And with these doors, it just feels like a little bit extra privacy compared to a hatchback. I don't know if that's actually true, it's just the way it feels to me. And so I understand why lots of people do not like them, but I actually really find them quite quirky and fun. If you've watched this far, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you consider liking and subscribing. This is the first time I've done a car review as opposed to more fixing up really poor quality Puntos. And so if you'd like to see more of that, let me know in the comments. And with that, I'll catch you down the road.